The Vanderbilts were once the world's richest family and made its millions in the railroad and shipping industries, but the money faded rapidly. When 120 Vanderbilts gathered for a reunion in 1973, not a single millionaire was present. So how did the Vanderbilt family lose all their wealth? The Vanderbilt legacy started from Cornelius, the Commodore, Vanderbilt, who came from a poor farming family in New York, who borrowed $100 from his mother when he was 16 in exchange for plowing 8 acres of land. He spent the $100, approximately $2,100 today, on a boat in 1810. He then used the boat to launch his own transport and freight company. The Commodore eventually invested in railroads and steamships, which quickly expanded to New York, and would eventually become the richest person in America. Cornelius's fortune was assessed at $100 million at the time of his death in 1877, which, according to the official data foundation, is about equivalent to $2.5 billion now. This was more money than was kept in the U.S. Treasury at the time. The Commodore is said to have told his oldest son, William Henry Billy Vanderbilt, "Any fool can make a fortune. It takes a man of brains to hold on to it." Billy took his father's advice to heart and doubled the family fortune before his death in 1885, but his own descendants would dwindle it all away in just a few decades. Billy Vanderbilt received the majority of his father's fortune, which included an 87% share in New York Central when his father passed away in 1877. However, while Billy was successfully able to expand the business, the father and son were nothing alike. As told by Arthur T. Vanderbilt II in his book, Fortune's Children, The Fall of the House of Vanderbilt, the father and son duo couldn't have been more different. Billy was more willing to make compromises and saw money as a cause of concern, in contrast to his father, who was aggressive and money-hungry. Billy wasn't as ambitious as his father, but he was fixed on keeping his money safe and would quibble over small expenses. He was able to more than double his fortune to about $200 million, making him the richest man in the world by 1883. This accomplishment may be attributed to his wise spending and keen business sense. But the money was a tremendous weight for him, and Billy Vanderbilt chose to divide his inheritance between his 2 eldest sons for them to share the great burden after he passed away in 1885. The Vanderbilts rose to prominence in the New York Gilded Age during a time when a rigid social structure predominated. After the Civil War and the Industrial Revolution, there were so many newly wealthy families that the upper class had to quickly assess who could be admitted into their exclusive society. The Museum of the City of New York claims that Mrs. Caroline Schermerhorn Astor and her right-hand man, Ward McAllister, served as the principal gatekeeper on who was worthy of being a part of this exclusive society. Together, they came up with the infamous List of 400, which established who qualified as members of New York society. The Vanderbilt family, which was still relatively wealthy, but had a bad image due to its patriarch Cornelius Vanderbilt, was not included on that list. Despite this, William K. Willie Vanderbilt, the grandson of the Commodore and son of Billy Vanderbilt, wed Alva Smith, a determined social climber who sought to be accepted into New York's high society. She built a massive mansion on Fifth Avenue's Millionaire Row, one of the largest houses there at the time, with her husband's money. She spared no expense, holding a lavish ball after the mansion was ready, which helped Willie and Alva make the list of 400 in March of 1883. The ball was estimated to have cost more than $250,000, or more than $6 million in today's dollar value. It makes sense that the Vanderbilts' wealth would soon begin to decline with expenses like this. Unlike the Commodore and Billy Vanderbilt, the third and fourth generations enjoyed a luxurious lifestyle and extravagant spending. They enjoyed splurging on a variety of magnificent villas, townhomes, and mansions. The Vanderbilt family owned some of the enormous 3 townhouses known as the Triple Palaces on Fifth Avenue's Millionaire Row. They were also prone to family rivalries and built enormous houses to compete with one another. For instance, after Elva Vanderbilt had her Petit Chateau built, her sister-in-law, Alice Vanderbilt, set out to build an even grander mansion that ultimately became the largest single-family house in New York City at the time. Sadly, after being sold to real estate developers, the majority of these mansions would be destroyed in the late 1920s. While some of the largest houses in New York City were being constructed by his sister-in-laws, George W. Vanderbilt and his wife Edith looked to Asheville, North Carolina to construct Biltmore, the 250-room French Renaissance castle on the 30,000-acre estate, which was completed in 1895, took 6 years to construct and about $6 million, or roughly $1.6 billion in today's dollars. The Biltmore House, which is currently a popular tourist destination and a recognized national landmark, is still run by Vanderbilt descendants and is regarded as the biggest privately held residence in the entire nation. The Vanderbilts also spent a significant amount of their wealth on philanthropy and pursuing their personal interests. The Commodore was known to have given one significant gift in 1873, a $1 million contribution to Central University in Nashville, Tennessee, which would later become Vanderbilt University. William Billy Vanderbilt, his son, continued to support Vanderbilt University and even provided bequests to institutions like the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the YMCA. 3 of Billy Vanderbilt's sons were well known for their support of charitable or cultural organizations. Cornelius Vanderbilt II, who was in charge of the family's assets and companies, made large donations to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Yale University, and the College of Physicians and Surgeons at Columbia University. William Vanderbilt, his younger brother, initially assisted in running the family business until 1903, when he handed over management of the railroads to another company. After that, he devoted the majority of his energy and resources to sporting events and cultural endeavors, including yacht racing, art philanthropy, and running the Metropolitan Opera. The youngest Vanderbilt, George, would make significant contributions to Columbia University, the American Fine Arts Society, and the New York Public Library, while contributing virtually little to the Vanderbilts' finances and businesses. The Vanderbilts, especially the Commodore, increased their wealth in a time when there was hardly any economic regulation. They achieved unfathomable wealth by being able to control entire industries, with no limits or taxes having any impact on their holdings. But at the turn of the century, there was a demand for expanded public services, as well as a world war that was lowering trade barriers. Early in the 20th century, the United States government, in need of fresh sources of funding, formally instituted the modern estate, gift, and income taxes. The Vanderbilts' riches and inheritance were suddenly and unexpectedly reduced because of these taxes, making it more difficult for them to support their extravagant lifestyles. Even worse, the Vanderbilts had to find new means to sustain their way of living and expansive estates when the Great Depression began. For instance, in order to boost local tourism and generate income to preserve the estate, Biltmore had to be made accessible to the general public in 1930. The Vanderbilts' excessive spending and lack of zeal to increase their family wealth meant that the taxes and depression hurt them far more severely than other affluent families, who fared perfectly fine at this time. The third child of Cornelius Vanderbilt II and the great-grandson of Billy Vanderbilt was Alfred Gawain Vanderbilt. Alfred was the main heir to his father's $72 million of wealth, and despite being the third eldest son, was seen as the one who would manage the family's riches the best. His second eldest child, Cornelius Vanderbilt III, was disinherited after getting married without his parents' permission. His oldest brother had passed away when he was still a young man. Unfortunately, on May 7, 1915, when the RMS Lusitania was torpedoed and sunk by a German submarine during World War I, young Alfred passed away at the age of 38 while traveling on board. Due to his early passing, his wife and small children received the family money before it had a chance to substantially increase under his leadership. The Commodore's great-grandson and younger brother of Cornelius Vanderbilt III and Alfred Vanderbilt was Reginald Claypool Vanderbilt. Reginald had a minimal role in the family business as the youngest son. He made no contributions to the wealth of the Vanderbilt family and instead used his own inheritance to gamble and drink till he died. There are numerous stories that illustrate his reckless way of life. He lost $70,000 playing poker on his 21st birthday, the same night he received his $15.5 million inheritance. When he was 42 years old, his physicians warned him that if he didn't stop drinking, he would likely pass away shortly. Instead, he persisted and even got married to Gloria Morgan, a socialite who was just 17 years old. Reginald passed away from liver cirrhosis only a few years later, in 1925, at the age of 45. Reginald had gambled away most of his fortune, leaving behind a widow and infant daughter who would have to survive off the interest payments of the young girl's $5 million trust fund until she was 21. The original source of the Vanderbilt's family riches, the New York Central, started to diminish in the first part of the 20th century as the Vanderbilt money was being divided up and spent wastefully amongst an increasing number of relatives. After reaching its peak in the 1920s, the transport and freight sector started to decline in the 1930s. Railroads started to lose ground to alternative forms of transportation by the end of World War II. The family sold its New York Central stock, and Robert Young of the Chesapeake and Ohio Railway took over in 1954. Mergers and various owners, however, were unable to save it, and in 1970, New York Central declared bankruptcy. Throughout it all, the Vanderbilts had been unable to create any major businesses that would have allowed them to continue to rank among the richest families in America. When Reggie Vanderbilt passed away in 1925, he left behind a newborn daughter who would eventually grow up to become Gloria Vanderbilt, a fashion designer, writer, artist, actress, and socialite who became well known for her jeans in the early 1980s. Gloria was raised by nannies in France because her father had died and her young widowed mother had become somewhat of a ghost herself. Gloria knew very little about her Vanderbilt family heritage and the wealth she was going to receive. Despite Gloria's apparent success in the public eye, she made it clear to her son, news anchor Anderson Cooper, that there was, quote, no trust fund, according to the Los Angeles Times. The Vanderbilt family fortune had shrunk into nothing by the late 20th century, just 100 years after the Commodore had overtaken his father as the richest man in America and his son as the richest man in the world. Gloria passed away in 2019, leaving Cooper the majority of her estate, which only had a value of roughly $1.5 million, despite being publicly projected to be worth $200 million. Thanks for watching. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more videos about your favorite wealthy families are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.